I'm back. This episode is going to be, I feel, monumental for me, to be honest. Season 2, episode 5, which is crazy, especially with what the content of this episode carries. It's not harsh material per se, but it's definitely harsh for me to speak about. I think it's easier to receive than to speak on. So bear with me as I kind of guide you through today's episode, which is my goodbye to Ohio. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the support and love as always. There's been a good amount of people that have been along this journey for the past year and a half or so with me. And you know, this episode is truly going to take us back farther than the year and a half that Save the Best has been around. It's going to take us back the past 22 years of life and what's gotten me to today, which this episode is actually very much so ironically coming out on the very last day of my residence in Ohio, which for anyone that knows me, they know I've spent my entire life here. There's a lot of unpacking today, and there's a lot of storytelling and a lot of depth of the ins and outs of my life, of what got me to this very point. Thank you again for tuning in, and this is my goodbye episode. So if you're new here, I started Save the Best for Last about a year and a half ago in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I've spent about the last 4 years of my life. I went to the Ohio State University, go Bucks, and I also started my career in Ohio in the high fashion industry, and it was truly the greatest 4 years of my life, without a doubt. It's interesting. I've kind of contemplated going back and forth between, do I start this episode from the beginning of, birth, even though a lot of the episodes, if you've listened, share a lot of insight of my life and the things I've encountered and lived through. But I don't think people, but I think a lot of people that will listen to this happen to be from Ohio because they know me, but I don't think people really understand, although I'm very much so a nomad and I've traveled all over the world, people don't understand the depths of my life, in full. And so taking it back to what I was just saying, Columbus was truly the greatest 4 years of my life. It was my adulthood, right? It's been my entire adulthood, and it's truly been about finding myself and finding what it is that I like, I don't like, who my people are, who my people aren't. Truly just learning who I am. Because fortunately and unfortunately, growing up in Cincinnati, which is about 2 hours south of Columbus, I had a lot of highs and lows throughout my life, and so my life's kind of been an up, down, up, down, up, down, as a lot of people's are. But I think Columbus was the first time I felt grounded and I felt stabilized to an extent. The development of myself was drastic. And so as I sit here, ironically, I'm sitting in front of my elementary school building. Initially, this episode, I really wanted to do a visual, right? A lot of people have asked and reached out and said, you got to do visuals again, Mac. Like, it's different, it's engaging, it's kind of like watching a TV show, whatever. And I agree, and thankfully I'd like to, share with you guys that within the next couple of months that's going to come back, because where I'm moving to actually has a podcast recording space within my own home, so that's really exciting. Although I wasn't able to do today's episode visually, I wanted to kind of give you the lay of the land of where I'm currently sitting, which is at my elementary school, which is bringing back a lot of memories. And although I shared with you how, there was a lot of development in Columbus brought me back to Cincinnati. So if you didn't listen to episode 1 of the season, I ended season 1 a little short because I had a pretty tragic year last year, and there were super high highs and the lowest of lows that I've ever experienced. One of those being coming back to Cincinnati. And I think a lot of that exists because of the traumas and the tragedies and the losses and the failures that came living here, right? Born and raised here, grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati. I went to private school from kindergarten till 5th grade. Let's get into that, because today is all about Ohio and my life living in Ohio. And going to Catholic school was very interesting. Very small class sizes, super lack of diversity, just very sheltered life. Didn't really know cultures, didn't really understand as much as I would have if I would have gone to public school, right? But thankfully, even though I don't want to make this a anti-private school, anti-Catholic school episode, but I think there's pros and cons to both private school, public schooling, any form of education, right? But looking back at my childhood as I sit in front of my elementary school building, I definitely realized that private school is a sheltered form of education, right? And I think there's a lot of people that come out of private school learning and growing and having maybe traits and abilities that you might not have within a public school format. However, I would personally choose public school all day over private school purely for the interactions and the encounters of, to my point, culture, different backgrounds, races, ethnicities, religion, than I would private school. Because in life, I think I will take experiences, culture, ethnicity, traveling, things such as that over a physical book, pen, and paper education all day. And it was ironic, I was talking to my grandmother this morning because over the past 2 weeks, as I've transitioned into getting a job and finding out that I was leaving Ohio, I've been really trying to reconnect with Ohio, the benefits of what living here has brought me, the people that have been here, so on and so forth. And my grandma brought something up that's so powerful to me, that traveling and learning people and environments is truly learning, right? I'm not trying to disparage learning in the format of a pen and paper or learning in a textbook. That is important as well. I have learned 10 times more through life and experiences and traveling and meeting people and networking and growing as a human being within a worldly format than I did in school. And I think, unfortunately, private school, even more specifically Catholic school, is a very sheltered form of learning. And there's a lot of people that are going to disagree with that, right? I think there's going to be people that listen to this and are like, what the hell is she talking about? Look at this con, this pro, this con, this pro, this con, so on and so forth. And they have a different take, but I'm here to talk about my story and my experiences, not yours. So if that's you, your way, your thoughts, your ideas aren't wrong. I just personally don't think private school and even homeschooling will ever compare to a public education or even an international learning experience, right? Just to give you kind of a background of that, throughout my life, even to this point, I definitely never was like the rest, right? And even, let's touch on that as far as Catholic school, I was definitely different, because if you only have 16 kids in the class, you're even more likely to stand out than 1,500. I never felt like I fit in, and I felt like when I was being my true form expressional self, which anyone that knows me knows I'm super outgoing, I'm very much so myself, and I really don't care what people think. Catholic school separated me more than any other environment I'd ever been in. I think that kind of started me off wanting to be even more different than the rest, because I realized from the jump I never fit in. Just to give you kind of a story, I've always been very comfortable in my own skin and always thought like, I know myself. I know what I want, I know what I don't want, whatever. And when I was in kindergarten, again, Catholic school, 16 kids in my class, we had a kindergarten teacher and then a kindergarten teacher's aide. And no one forgets the story of when I told the aide that she was very, very pregnant, and I guess she was about to go on maternity leave, and I told her to leave. And I was 5. I told her to leave. Why are you here? You're about to have a kid. Like, I'll take care of it. Don't worry. And I truly, in my 5-year-old mind, believed that. Like, I got it. We're good here. We don't need you at this point, right? And that obviously probably came off disrespectful, rude, whatever. And there was a lot of encounters like that I had. I'll never forget 4th grade. Again, Catholic school. It's just so bizarre to think about things like that, for example, when I was in 4th grade, I got what is equivalent to like a detention or a suspension for wearing a headband that had sparkles on it, right? And it's like, really? Like a 4th grader? We're talking about an 8-year-old girl who's getting suspended for wearing a sparkly headband. However, I was struggling with a concept within a class, and the teacher wouldn't stay after school to meet with me to help teach me this idea or this concept, but she had the time after school to sit down a meeting with my mom to talk about my sparkly headband. That's what I just don't understand. And both of those stories kind of highlight that just indifference of expressing individualism. And that's the hard part of growing up here, you know? And it's been amazing to see Ohio transform into what it is now, which, I'm not ashamed to say I'm from here. However, I do think traveling all over the world, I've now been able to see myself as a child and really feel for her and have an understanding of why I was treated the way I was, right? Because there's definitely a status quo and a norm here. I never was that out the womb. I was never that. And that's okay, I think the moral of this episode is really to, wherever you're from, wherever you're listening from, I have obviously a lot of Ohio friends and followers that follow along with my story and my episodes, and I have people that are from the middle of nowhere, Kansas, Alabama, wherever, right? I just want you to know, if you always feel like you aren't a part of something, or you don't belong, or you're different, or whatever that looks like for you, not only is that a beautiful thing, but you're paving the way for those to follow, right? Because now at that Catholic school, they have, a broader dress code. People that need maternity leave are probably having a longer leave time frame so that when they're 36 weeks pregnant, they can leave work. Whatever that looks like. My point is, it's okay to go against the status quo. It's okay to stand out. It's okay to wear the sparkly headband. Whatever that looks like for you, it's okay. And unfortunately, Ohio, as far as culturally acceptable, I feel like, within the United States, is definitely behind as far as accepting those that are different, whatever that looks like. Your gender identity, your sexual identity, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, whatever that is for you, you're paving the way for someone that's coming behind you, and that's a beautiful thing. Today I was very grateful to see my entire extended family because my cousin just graduated high school. It's so funny, again, to just kind of give you an idea of what growing up here was like, is that part of my family lives in a very rural part of Ohio. I grew up in a suburb, so it wasn't a city, but it definitely had development. Again, I graduated with about 1,000 kids at my public high school, as I'll, go in to tell that story. But today was very eye-opening because I was telling them about my new job, which, again, at the end of the episode, I'll kind of talk about that. Telling them about my new job and where I'm at as far as my career, what my plans are to implement within this job and all those things, and they physically couldn't grasp what I was saying. And I'm not saying this to say anything negative about them. I love these people, but it was just eye-opening. I'm like, these people, they've never left here, right? They've maybe gone on a vacation for a week, but they've never submerged themselves into a different culture, environment, setting, etc. So they really can't grasp a lot of the things that I say because it's such a foreign concept to them. And it was just such a eye-opening day as far as, me choosing to be unique and different and standing apart from my family and being confident in that. And I also had a relative today just tell me how inspired she is by me, and she's, younger than me. I've always chosen to let my differences shine and never been hidden or hush-hush from them, right? Like, I have this podcast, and you have to understand, when I'm interviewing with employers, they know about this, right? This isn't something I'm embarrassed about. This isn't something that I don't want people to know about. Even with social media, going, even transitioning into that topic, a lot of people I know are really weird about me sharing their social media, or their social media mixing with work, or, mixing their professional life and their personal life. And for me, that's been really a complex, right? Because I'm very outgoing, I'm confident, I love myself, I love my life. But with social media, it's so hard because it's like, okay, well, I can only show this side of myself, but if I show this side of myself and my employer sees that, what are they going to think about that? And what does my family think? And then I'm looking at other people and I'm like, well, they're doing all this. And so then there's the comparison between myself and others. And, even though I'm confident and I love myself and I love my life and I always am who I am, I can't lie and sit here and act like social media doesn't fuck with me. I can't sit here and act like I haven't had to pretend to be someone else to fit in a certain social settings. I can't sit here and pretend like I haven't been in situations where people are terrible to me because of who I am, or judge me because of how I look, or because of what I wear or whatever. But as I sit and truly look at my life from birth till now, I'm so proud of what I have overcome to get to today. Although I can sit here and say, I don't think I would put my kids in Catholic school. I'd put my kids in public school, and I'd want my kids to have access and have the ability to travel the world and see other cultures and people and things such as that. I understand it hasn't been perfect, and I don't always have these feelings. Some days I am self-conscious, and some days I do look at others and think, oh, I wish I had that, I wish I had this, or I'm not content with my body or my job or my family or this, that, and the third. At the end of the night, when I lay down in my bed and I go to sleep, I do always try to remember that, one, God is good, and two, I'm so, so, so proud of the place I am in my life. Although life hasn't been the easiest, and again, we'll get into some of those foundational childhood moments, memories, I'm here. And my whole life, I've said, I've wanted to get out, I've wanted to go, and I've traveled, and I've, even had extended stays / lived short term in other places, but I've never had permanent residency in another place. And I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to rediscover this next chapter of my life. I'm just excited to start a whole new level and dynamic of my career and what I'm able to accomplish. I'm just excited, and I'm just, as I keep saying, I'm proud. And I think a lot in life we pull apart the negatives and what could be better, especially myself. Anyone that knows me knows that nothing is ever enough. And right now, as I'm transitioning into this new phase, I'm enough. This is enough. This job is enough. This place is enough. The people I have in my life are enough. Life is enough. And life is truly amazing, and it is what it should be. And all the pieces are always gonna fit together in the puzzle at the end of the day. And anyway, back to what I was originally talking about, was just growing up here. Transitioning from private school to public school was, it's funny, if I sat with my siblings, it was probably harder for them than for me, because I think I had so deeply needed an environment like that, and I didn't know it because I didn't know it existed, right? Obviously, I knew public schools existed because I had friends that I played sports with that were in public schools, but I was never a part of something like that, so all I knew was the 16 white kids that I went to private school with. And so transitioning into public school, it was so awesome to me. And even though there was definitely, I don't want to make it seem like public school is like this fairy tale, happy-go-lucky, everything's sunshine and rainbows. No, the most tragic things that I've gone through took place while I was in public school. However, those experiences shaped me to today. So being a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, a middle schooler, transitioning from private to public school, it was a lot, right? No one knew who I was. They're like, who's this new girl on the block? I went to a very, very big school. Even though there's so many people, and you're not going to stand out as much because you're kind of just mixing with the rest. Plus, I was in 6th grade at an elementary school. I'm in 7th and 8th grade at a middle school building that was multiple elementary schools coming together. So it was really a good time to submerge myself into that environment. But it was hard. I didn't know, and I wasn't aware of a lot of things as the other kids were, as far as, that shelteredness, like I shared. I feel from birth until 12 years old, I was sheltered from a lot of things. And I don't want you to think that I was, and again, I'm not judging anyone like this, but it's not like I never saw the light of day, or, even people that are homeschooled, right? That's really another level of shelteredness. However, I got exposed to things really quickly, right? Going from private to public school. And this is, kind of the cons of it is I was sexualized immediately. I'll never forget, like 7th grade, I was 12 years old. My first week of school, someone grabbing my ass. Right? And thinking about that is so disturbing now, because it's like, that's a child, a very, very young child. It's funny because working with the public, I so often hear these stories of, I had a woman that I know recently come into my job that was telling me a story about a girl having, I'll just say, a form of sex for privacy reasons, but a 7th grade girl having sex, essentially, in the hallway at school. And I'm like, that is so insane to even think about. And again, that's what we talk about as far as progression and exposure versus sheltered, and why people do choose to homeschool their kids or be in private school or whatever that looks like for you. It's like, well, you think about stuff like that and it's like, private school might make sense. It was an adjustment and it was crazy. Like another story. So the funny thing is, the kid that harassed me my first week of being in a public middle school setting caused hell my whole middle school life, right? Like he just did obnoxiously absurd things to me and got me in drama and got me associated with all these crazy things. And then I was, bullied pretty badly. And on top of that, I had acne. I wasn't the cutest cat, we'll just say that. But I was a little girl, right? Like I had braces, I had acne, I was developing, I started my period, and I was experiencing all these things. And that happening on top of being in a middle school with 1,000+ kids, coming from a protected, sheltered environment, having divorced parents, having a complex with my parents on top of that, it was just a lot. And, that, caused issues at home. And then my mom kicked me out of my house. So I was living at my dad's house in middle school. And then it was just always a constant complex. And I think as a child, a lot of people look back at my childhood. I actually had my neighbor made a comment to me yesterday about how, I quote, this is what she said, I was a fucking shit show. That's what she said. And hearing that as an adult, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I swallowed it. But it's kind of disturbing, right? This grown-ass woman is referencing a child as a fucking shit show. Again, I'm quoting, I'm putting up my fingers right now. And it's like, one, that's a child, right? I was a child in general. I don't like to have any sort of negative influence or judgment on a child, but again, that's neither here nor there. And second of all, I was going through so much trauma and tragedy at such a young age, and for someone to judge that, but again, people don't know, right? And I think that's what's been so unfortunate about my life and so many women's lives growing up, is a lot of girls experience what I experienced. Maybe not the private to public school, maybe not the divorced parents, maybe not all the aspects of what my youth brought me, but they experience hardship, trials, tribulations, trauma, sexual assault, rape, domestic abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, whatever that looks like. To look back, and again, I'll continue to share this journey as we get through this episode, to look back at what I experienced and the fact that people judge me, and still to this day, a 40-year-old woman is calling my child self a shit show, is like, damn, the whole world was on my back. Everyone was judging me. Everyone thought I was a shit show, right? And I still am here. And I'm not only am I here, but I'm thriving here. And I'm doing what I want here. And I'm happy here. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm doing what I want. That's one thing that a lot of people can't say. They're doing what's influenced by those around them. They're doing what their parents want. They're doing what other people want of them, not what they want of themselves. So, yeah, that transition was a lot. And then again, transitioning again. So where I grew up, I went to a school district. If you're not from Ohio, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. But if you're from Ohio, you probably will, because I went to that big of a school. The school district's called Lakota, and there's two sides. There's an east side and there's a west side. And so I went to a west side elementary school, west side middle school, but then my house is on the borderline, so I decided to go to east for high school because my sister went there, and my mom thought it was what would be easiest. And so again, that was another big adjustment, going from the west schools to the east schools. So it was a whole new group of kids. All my friends from middle school went to west high school. I went to east for high school. A whole new group of kids, a whole new getting to learn everyone, getting to learn who people are, who are my friends, who are not. There's also, a lot of people know about me, especially after my episodes with Miss Jones. I played competitive soccer and I traveled all over the universe for that sport. And so having to juggle that with high school, and I literally, me and my mom always joke, I went to high school Monday through Thursday, and then Thursday through Sunday I would be getting out of school, getting on a plane, and I'd be flying somewhere to go play soccer somewhere, because I was going to college to play soccer. Like, that was what was going to happen. School was, you get good grades to get by to play soccer. School was for soccer. And so, as high school came about, and unfortunately my sophomore year of high school is when I was pretty brutally raped, assaulted in my own home. It was a crucial turning point of my life, right? Because I have soccer, I have the new school, I have all the things that come with the school, the bullying, the drama, the judgment, all the things that happened. And my first real boyfriend, of course I had little middle school boyfriends that we'd sneak out on the playground and whatever, but my first real relationship in my life, that happens. And I've shared that was actually something I talked about on my first episode, but that was truly such a pivotal moment in my life, right? Because anyone that's been assaulted can also really relate to this and speak to this. However, that assault truly changed everything, because I had to stop playing soccer. I was in and out of school. Let's also talk about the complexes. I was going to the same school of someone that beat and raped me. So imagine that. And the thing is, I say imagine that, but there's a lot of people that listen to this. Screw that. There's a lot of people in this world, not just the couple hundred of people that listen to this. There's thousands of women in this world that not only are beaten and raped or assaulted of any kind, which is absolutely disgusting, but they're around their abuser for a long portion of their life. And for me, unfortunately, that was the scenario, right? So I'm raped in my own home, which, to give you even more of an in-depth complex, to fast forward to now, when I left Columbus to come back home at the end of last year, I live not only in the same home, but in the same exact room that I was beaten and raped in. And again, that's probably a lot for some of you to digest, a lot for some of you to even listen to. A lot of you might not even want to hear that. But I just want people to have a tip of the iceberg, honestly, of the life I've lived that's gotten me to today, which is such a huge moment of my life, is leaving here. So again, let's go back, and then I'll fast forward to the fact that I'm sleeping in the same room of such a catastrophic situation like that. But that happens to me. Here, let's talk about something crazy. So that happens to me. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of women, especially that I've met through therapy, that I've met in groups, that I've just met just throughout my life, unfortunately, I would say personally, this isn't a statistic, but personally, more women I know have been assaulted than haven't been. Fact. Whatever that looks like to them, have gone through some sort of physical, sexual, mental, emotional assault. A lot of people have an issue with, the authenticity of what they went through, which is sad. It's very disturbing. It's honestly disgusting in my opinion. However, to flip the coin there's a lot of women that do have a lack of authenticity to situations like that, which is also disturbing, disgusting, and very bizarre. And it's unfortunate because women like that make it so women like myself and many, many others aren't really validated, right? But I bring that up because after going through what I went through, my situation was very bizarre, because it's not that people didn't believe me, because the person that did that to me unfortunately had a reputation for that, still does. Was very much so known. I have no idea anything about this person anymore. Why would I? But he was known and had multiple allegations of him, not just raping, but brutally raping girls, starting from a very young age. And so, unfortunately, when this happened to me, I felt not only so stupid because I had heard a rumor of this, but it gave me this perspective that, okay, one, not only is what happened to me catastrophic, but people, it's not that they don't believe me, they just don't think it's that deep. Again, I want to say that again, because I will, that's one thing about my upbringing and my story that has always kind of left on a very confused question mark, is that myself and a lot of girls that were in my shoes that had this experience with this individual were never not believed, but people just did not care. So again, let's build off that, right? So that happened to me. I was, there's really no way to put it besides I was really, really, really not okay. Right? Like, obviously, anyone, like, that was a horrific, the worst thing I've ever gone through in my life, right? And not only was I not okay, but I go to school and it's not like people are like, again, not believing me or calling me a liar, but they're laughing at me and they think it's funny. And I'll never forget, I'm getting chills sitting here thinking about this story because, again, like I said, my goal in this lifetime is to pave the way for the women behind me to not, I don't want to say not experience that because that's so an out of our control experience, but at least have the community, the foundation, and the people around them to overcome that and be empowered and thrive in life, right? Because that's truly what I embody. I'll never forget, and people are going to hear this and think this is absolutely crazy, but I cannot make this up. I went to a football game a year later, I went to a football game, and nothing was the same after that situation. I was never the same person. I completely changed my demeanor, my goals, what I wanted in life. Everything changed after that because that changes you, you know what I mean? That's a life-changing, catastrophic event. And again, back to what I was saying, because I get sidetracked so often, is that I'm walking into this football game with my sister and someone started a student section chant saying, I gotta kind of change the way this was said because I can't use this person's name or information, but a chant was started that was a joke about me getting raped. A student section, hundreds of kids were chanting a joke about me getting raped. And, oh God, this is like a hard, very hard time to relive, but I share this again because so many people that live in environments like this or go to schools where they went through something like that, or just, screw Ohio, screw the environment, screw everything, go through assault and get mistreated following the assault. They don't have the support. They aren't believed maybe in some cases. They're made fun of. They're joked at. They're laughed at. They're whatever. It's not okay. You're validated. You're understood. You're heard. And there is another side. I think so many women they can't see the forest through the trees because their whole life is crumbling down. Everything's been taken from them, not only sexually, but mentally, emotionally, in some cases financially, because legal gets involved and their whole life is stripped from them and they're nothing. They're stripped to absolutely nothing. And I was, right? Like, that happened to me at 15 years old and I was nothing. I was nothing from 15 to 18. I was nothing. I was broken. I was extremely unwell. I saw myself as worthless. I had nothing to live for. My mental was completely shattered. My emotional, my physical, everything was nothing. And I sit here in the same exact area of everything that I'm sharing with you transpired, and I'm not mad any of it happened. And that sounds insane, and I know you're at this point like, okay, this girl might need help. And don't we all? But I say that because as I continue to share the story and explain everything that's unfolded, that was all meant to happen. That was all part of the plan. And it's tragic. It's unfortunate. It's disturbing. It's disgusting. It's not something I talk about on every episode, that's for sure. But I don't want it to be something that's not told. I don't want it to be something that's forgotten about. I don't hide any aspects, part of my life. A lot of people are like, I'm an open book, but I am to an extent. I'm not going to sit here and tell you every detail of my assault, but I share what I need to share to tell you that that's not where your story ends. Okay? That's not where your story ends, and it never will be. But that's something that's in your power. It's in your control. And you truly, as a human being, have so much power, both literally and metaphorically. You have so much power. I just want anyone that goes through anything that's trauma related at all. I pray that people don't have to experience what I've experienced. But I also haven't experienced what other people have experienced, right? Everyone has their own forms and stories that have formed their trials, tribulations, traumas, etc. But that doesn't define you, and that's not the end of you. And it never will be. And unfortunately, a lot of times our mind and our environments and our societies lead us to believe that that's the end and that that's who we are and that we're a quote unquote, I'm putting up my air quotes right now, I know you can't see them, but that's our shit show. My neighbor doesn't know the half of it. She doesn't. She sees what people see on the outside, which what people saw on the outside was a shit show. Of course it was. I was beaten nearly unconscious and raped in my house. Of course I was a shit show. Like, wow, that's a shocker. What? It's all part of the story. And the story doesn't need to end during the worst chapter of your life. That's what makes the story so empowering, right? You know, a comparison, this is super bizarre. You're going to hear this and be like, this girl is absolutely batshit. This makes no sense. Some of you are like, oh, that's actually a good analogy. But I see it kind of as like, this is a very bizarre comparison, but here we go. Tom Brady, not a huge fan of his, but you can't argue the man was absolutely talented. I'm not even going to guess how many times he's won the Super Bowl, but it was a lot. Very impressive. Again, super talented individual. This is a very bizarre comparison. But, you know, there's highs and lows within everybody's story. And if we look at Tom Brady, his career, there was highs and there was lows. I don't even think the man, I think he like walked on at Michigan. Like, I don't even think he was looked at in the younger years of his life. A lot of people told him, like, you know, you would never be, you'd never be, you'd never be. And he obviously ended up being the GOAT. And, you know, then going on to the later years of his life, people said, retire, 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 retire. And, you know, arguably people would say he should have retired at his last Super Bowl with the Patriots. But what did he say? He stuck up the birdie and he went to Florida, and what did he do? He won another one. And it's like his story never ended, even though, you know, I only know the half of it. I honestly, truly don't know a lot about Tom Brady. And it's funny that I'm saying this because I've always been not a huge Tom Brady fan because I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was a Bengals fan, and we always sucked. And so the Patriots were like the Antichrist. And ironically, as I tell the story, where am I moving to? Boston. Okay? So the irony of this story is multiple things. One, he was always told that he was a quote-unquote shit show. Not literally, but metaphorically. Like, he wasn't enough. He wasn't good enough to play at Michigan. He sure as hell is good enough to play in the NFL. Here we are, to guesstimate, don't come after me, but 12 Super Bowls plus or minus later, who's a shit show? He's not a shit show. But he is. We all are. And unfortunately, society also always likes to paint pictures of people before they're truly unlocking their fullest potential. And my whole life has been like that. Again, like I just shared with you, my high school was a shit show. I finally leave the high school, move to Columbus, and I finally proved to people, okay, I'm not just a depressed, Eeyore, crazy, over-the-top individual, but I'm so much more. You know, in Columbus, I accomplished so much. I lived in my own space. I was a part of running a $20 to $40 million business. I was a fitness connoisseur. I still am. I was a part of many people that need help in the disabled community's lives. I started a podcast. That's been a dream my entire life. I got to work on music. I got to be a part of people's music careers, help them create albums, help them create concepts, help them create podcasts, help be a part of podcast development and production. I've got to truly do so many things that as a child, especially during those times where I thought my life was over, I dreamed about, and I did them. And not only did I do them, but I did them on my own. So again, let's fast forward. So I accomplished all this in Columbus, and then like I shared in the first episode, which if you didn't listen, well, go back so you have something to reference. I then came to a realization that not only was that job not fulfilling me, the relationship wasn't fulfilling me, there were so many things that spiraled to bring me to the point where I was like, I gotta go back home. I wanna make it very, very clear. Going back home was, again, up there with one of the hardest things I had to experience within my lifetime because I was going back to everything I just shared with you. The traumas, the trials, the tribulations, the you're not good enough, the shit show, the this, the that, the assault, the everything, right?
I've slept the last 9 months of my life in the same exact room. That, like, I've already said this, but I want you to have a clear picture of hardship, right? The last 9 months have been hardship. And every day I've woken up and I've decided today is a new day. Today is a new day to not only reinvent yourself, but rebuild yourself to be the best possible Mackenzie Elizabeth Hart that you can be. And although Ohio hasn't been always sunshine and rainbows, the development and the progress and the things I've been able to accomplish living in a small-minded environment shows that I can do anything. And that is empowering. If you take anything from any of the episodes I listened to, I want it to be that. I don't want to say I don't care, but I'll rephrase it to, it does not matter what you've been through, what you've seen, what you've not seen, what you've not been through, where you've lived, who you've been around. Your circumstances do not matter, because every day is a new day to reinvent yourself, regardless of the circumstances. And that's true. And I've said this on many episodes, and people, I think, really skip through this statement, but every day in every situation and every obstacle life throws your way, you can make a decision. You can be bitter or you can be better. And I preach this, and I'll say it on 100 more episodes if I need to. I don't care. Don't care. I told everybody this phrase. You know why? Because at the end of the day, every single day, I wake up and I choose to be better. And some days that looks better than others. Some days I can't get out of bed and I'm upset and I think about these things and I reminisce and I'm like, damn, life is hard. It's a lot more difficult and challenging and uglier than that. But all in all, I have days like that. I have days where I don't want to keep going. I want to just sit in my bed and rot and feel sorry for myself. I do. Because I have every right to feel sorry for myself. I shouldn't be here. I should not be in the situation that I'm currently going into. I should not. But that's my issue. I keep saying that, and I should. I have every right, every ability, every understanding, every ability to be exactly where I currently am at and where I'm going. And that's the problem. We tell ourselves, I shouldn't be here. I'm not good enough. Nothing's ever enough. I want this, I want that. But instead, be in the current moment and have pride and have gratitude for what is, and for the journey and for the story. So yeah, the past 9 months, I've had, of those 9 months, I've only made, this will be episode number 5, because the end of last year I stopped making episodes and I cut season 1 short to kind of process this, live through this, understand this, and come up with a plan of what that looked like. So let's kind of dive into that, okay? The past 9 months, I want people to understand. Outside looking in, people are like, you got to go back to your mom's, you lived in her basement, you didn't have to pay anything really besides car insurance, phone bill, typical bills, but I didn't have rent, right? Got to travel all over the country, got to see so many people, do so many things. But you have to understand, through all of that, I was fighting these demons because of, one, physically living, residing in the same place that such a tragic, traumatizing experience happened. But I also have a lot of pride. I have a lot of pride in the things that I've accomplished. I have a lot of pride in the things that I've been able to do and be a part of. And so to come back to Cincinnati, Ohio, and have nothing to show for was devastating. It was devastating. It was embarrassing. I didn't want people to know I was here. I didn't want people to know what I was doing. I didn't want people to know where I was going, because I was absolutely embarrassed and I felt like I was letting myself and everyone else down. And now as this episode comes out, the day before I leave here, I'm like, no, this for your development was crucial. One, you were 21 and 22 years old. And so many people always say, oh, you're so young, girl. You're so young. You need to stop stressing. But that's just me. Me by nature is I always want to accomplish everything and more. Nothing is ever enough. And it's something I need to work on. Everyone knows that about me. But now as my time here is coming to an end, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that it all worked out the way it did, because one, I'm now transitioning into a phase that as Meek Mill said, I prayed for times like this, right? But I also learned and grew so much in the past 9 months that I never thought I would have as much development growth as I did. Everything about it, even, the aspect of, a lot of people don't know this, but for about a year now, not 9 months, 12 months, I've applied to over 600 jobs globally. I've had probably about 100 interviews. I've had multiple in-person interviews all over the country, and nothing worked out. I got a handful of job offers, but they just weren't the right fit for me. And I knew that when you're talking about relocating somewhere across the country, across the world, it needs to be right. And, a lot of times you don't know until you get there, but for all the offers that were presented, they just weren't right. I even this is crazy, but on the earlier stages of living here, had the opportunity to work for a dream brand of mine. They essentially offered me the job. I find an apartment, I do all these things, and they decided to essentially get rid of that position within the brand. And it was terrible. I mean, to anyone, that's another episode I'll do, but to anyone in the job market, it's hard. It's another, hardship I've faced, and a very difficult place to be in is looking for a career-like job. Finally, months and months and months, I reconnected with a former coworker of mine from Louis Vuitton, and highly doubt she listens to this, but if she does, I have so much gratitude and so much love for this woman. She's just incredible because she doesn't really know me well, but she knows I did a lot at Louis Vuitton. I was very accomplished at Louis Vuitton. I got to be a part of a lot of development and a lot of things within Louis Vuitton, and she raised her hand and said, this girl is worth something. She really is. Wherever we need to fit her in within this brand, because she now works with another brand, we need to do whatever we need to do. That gave me faith. It gave me hope. It gave me that drive, that passion again. And, even if she doesn't hear this, I'm definitely, when I see her, going to share this with her, because a lot of people, a lot of experiences got me through this past 9 months. Have gotten me through my life, right? But it's people like that, it's conversations like this, it's podcast episodes like this that people need to hear to give them clarity. And so I ended up interviewing with the brand that I'm now working with for a position in DC, which, if anyone knows, my sister lives in DC, and it felt so right. My sister lives there. It was in operations, which is, anyone that knows, my work history is in supply chain and operations, and it just felt so right. And I had multiple interviews. And I was like, I'm getting this job. I knew I was getting this job. And unfortunately, one day I got a call that they went with another candidate. And at this point, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing so wrong? I've interviewed for hundreds of jobs at this point. I've gone here, there, and everywhere to have the opportunity and to put myself into the position to get back to the point in my life that I was physically, emotionally, and mentally thriving, and nothing's transpiring. And it's funny, a lot of people, listen to the first episode where I talked about working in the luxury field and working around high-profile people, and how sometimes that can affect and alter and mess with your self-worth and your self-confidence. And applying for jobs like this really made me think about that and think about, okay, what truly defines a healthy lifestyle and a healthy job environment? And is that something as a industry that people find is an issue? And that was really a concern to me. However, this brand, and this woman specifically, and the amazing, talented, intelligent women that I'm now very blessed to work around, have truly showed me that it's not fair to label an industry as a whole and label your worth based off your job. And I think, even though it was 5 short months ago, the last 5 months have changed my mindset on that as far as your career and your job. Working at Louis Vuitton, that was my identity. Anyone knows that about me. That job was my identity. And I needed to experience that to now be in the position where I'm like, no, I work for X brand. That is my job, that is career, that is what I do for income, and that is my passion, but that is not Mackenzie. And I think that's, if I have one takeaway from the past 9 months of my life, that's it. You aren't your job, you're not your career, you're not your sport, you're not your gym, you're not your friends, you're you. right? And those things are part of you. They're part of your development. They make you, they make who you are, your personality, your likes, your dislikes. But when you turn that into your identity, it consumes you. And I think that was part of why I've had such a hard time coping over the last 9 months, is because I truly had an identity crisis, right? And I'm now in such a good place in life where I can separate my career from my identity. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I didn't end up getting that job in DC with this brand. And I'm grateful that I didn't get the opportunities with all the other brands I interviewed for. And to complete that story, because as always, I get sidetracked. After a month of getting told, hey, we decided to go with another candidate, and I was just sitting there like, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to change? What do I need to fix? I was going to interview classes. I was doing mock interviews with people. I was so job hunting focused. I would be with my friends in different cities and different places on vacation, and all I could think about was getting a job. And eventually I sat there and I was like, no, it's just, this is not your choice, right? This is God's choice, God's timing. Everything happens for a reason. Just sharing everything that I've shared with this episode is everything happens for a reason, and it happens in divine timing. So no, it's not you. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to change how you're interviewing. You don't need to change what you're sharing. In some people's cases, maybe you do, okay? Maybe you do. And if you are in a place where you are job hunting and you're interviewing, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, and I can give you my feedback on your resume, your interview skills, techniques, because it could be that. It could be that for you. But for me, as I take a step back and truly looked at my situation, it's just none of those jobs were meant to be. And so after getting the no from the DC job with, again, the brand that I'm now employed for, I took a step back and just did a lot of self-reflection. And a lot of, okay, over the past 9 months, what have I learned? What do I still need to learn? What things in my life are helping me? What things in my life are hindering me? Right? And I think that was a really good reflection to have. And I'll never forget, I was in Southern California with my brother for his birthday and with my family, and there was a lot transpiring. And the last day I was there, I was extremely upset because I felt like, God, nothing's working out, nothing's happening, nothing's transpiring, nobody wants me, no one likes me. And it was back to that feeling like I shared earlier of in high school of never fitting in elementary school, never fitting in, not being different than everyone else, and just that isolation feeling. And unfortunately, I struggle with isolation a lot because of everything I've shared, right? It's taken me to this place where when life isn't giving me lemons and sunshine and all is well, I isolate, and that's just a coping mechanism I have that I need to work through. But it's because I've always been different and I've always stood out. But that's my power. That's my superpower. That's what I'm proud of. That last day in Southern California with my family was, although it was very emotional, it was a lot. And my sister's gonna listen to this and be like, yeah, that was a long day. It was beautiful, and it was what I needed to feel and experience to know that you are worth it, and what's meant to be is going to be. A week later, I got a call from that woman I was speaking of and referencing earlier, and she said, that was one of the hardest decisions I've made in my career. You're extremely talented. You embody everything this brand is. And although we made the decision to go with what made sense for that role, which was a candidate that was local, had worked for the brand, and knew that store, which in their defense makes sense. She went on to share that I was gonna find a home for you within our community because you have so much talent, and I could not stop thinking about you. That changed everything for me. Everything. Changed absolutely everything for me, because although my friends and family were a huge part of getting me through the past, again, 9 months of my life, hearing it from someone that really doesn't know me was different, right? Like, she knows me from a work perspective, but it's not like she has this longevity of a relationship with me and has a personal relationship with me, where she's saying that to make me feel better. She didn't have to call me. She didn't have to tell me that. She doesn't owe me anything. She said that because that was the reality of the situation. And she went on to ask me, what are your thoughts on moving to Boston? And it's funny, anyone that knows me knows that I want an opportunity, right? That's what I want more than any specific place, any specific person, any specific anything. I want an opportunity, but it obviously wasn't, as a friend of mine said, on my bingo card. However, it is the opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to not only be a part of such a empowering business, but I'm so excited to move and rediscover who I am and continue to learn and grow within myself and continue to show everyone and show myself that my story didn't end. And not only did it not end, but I continue to rise above and be better every day. So thank you for not only being a part of the ins and the outs and the ups and the downs and the back and the forward of this episode, but thank you for being a part of my journey and my story. And thank you for continuing to empower me to be able to share my truth with whoever wants to be a part of it and listen to it. And thank you for being a huge part of what's bringing me to my next chapter. So when this episode comes out, it will be my very last day of being a resident in the state of Ohio. And so to Ohio and to all my friends and family that live here, I am forever grateful for the experience, the life, the highs and the lows of what brought me to this moment today, which is nowhere near the end of my story. It's only the beginning. So, thank you, Ohio, for bringing us Save the Best for Last, bringing us me, bringing us my story, and bringing us everyone else that's been a part of my story and my journey. Until next time, because next time we'll be in Boston. That's the tea, sis. Bye.